Hello, everyone. As we get started, we're going to get started in just a few minutes. Hello, Britt. I think you got it. You're my first person. We're going to give it a few more minutes for other people to get involved, and then we'll get started. So we're going to be doing chapter 2, which is pages 25 through. Should remember this. I just typed it a few minutes ago. Through 38. I mean, that would be helpful. One more minute, and then we're going to get started. Thanks, babe. Hang with us while we hear this. Go the first time on YouTube Live. I'm still learning the controls. All right, let's go ahead and get started, and we're going to see if we can get this going. I've lost my blur, and I cannot figure out how to do that, so forgive my Betsy background for the first YouTube Live video I'm making. We'll get started. All right, so again, we honor for those of us joining the recording a little later. We are doing the book How Not to Read the Bible by Dan Kimball, and we are doing chapter 2, which is page 25 to 38. So, with that, I'm going to, again, our procedure, what we'll normally do is I'm going to kind of briefly talk about sort of what my reaction was to the chapter, and then we're going to look at how that what other people thought about the chapter. Let's deal with that. I get my microphone right. Okay. So in chapter two, Daniel introduces four sort of concepts that he's going to sort of orient this book around. So he calls it here on page 26. Here are the four facts about how to and how not to read the Bible. One, the Bible is a library and not a book. Two, the Bible is written for us and not to us. Three, never read a Bible verse. Four, all of the Bible points to Jesus. Now, in the chapter two, really just goes with the first two statements, and that's where I'm going to focus on today. He's going to deal with 3 and 4 when he gets to chapter 3, which we'll cover next time. All right, so the first one is the Bible is a library, not a book. And I really like the way he introduced it, but for those of you who may be watching this video without reading the chapter, the point he makes is that the Bible is a collection of books. Even though we treat it in the modern world as one bound volume, we call it the Bible as opposed to the books or whatever we might think. Now that creates a point that we need to focus on, is that the Bible itself is having a conversation between different times of composition and different authors, maybe at the same time, who are seeing things a little bit different. And that may be a little unnerving for us to think, what are you talking about, a conversation, or that the different authors might have different viewpoints, or that you're dealing with things over a period of time. So let me start with that last one, work my way through that. So the first one is the Bible is written over hundreds of years. We don't know exactly when some of the books are written, but it records a history that covers something like 2,000 years from the first patriarch of Abraham, which is sort of datable, to the time of Christ and the early church, which is something like 1,500, 1,800, 2,000 years later. And we'll get into all of those sorts of dating issues, I'm sure, in the future. But we're covering sort of the same amount of history as we have experienced since the time of Jesus. And just like we have had historical events and things that are going to go on, and different generations are responding to what their ancestors had already written and already said, we are also seeing a conversation occur within the Bible. And he again does a little bit more as it goes on in the book, but there are different sort of opinions that occur because some of the people who are writing early books, they don't really have anyone to respond to. They sort of, put their flag in the ground and make their opinion about how God should be understood. Let's start with that. And then other people who read those books and go, I don't know about that. What about this issue? And so one of the key ones I want to point out here is the book of Deuteronomy, which is the 5th book in the Bible, the way we have organized it. Has one opinion about how history works. It has what we're going to call the Deuteronomistic viewpoint, or the Deuteronomistic perspective. And it basically says, if you do good things are going to happen to you. If you do bad things are going to happen to you. Well, then several books come along in the way we now in the middle. One of those is something like Ruth. Another one is Jonah. Another one is Job. Another one is Ecclesiastes. And they're all going to say, I don't think that's how it works exactly because of this situation, this situation, this situation, right? So the 4 books that I just mentioned, Ruth, Jonah, Job, Ecclesiastes all give different reasons why Deuteronomy's opinion is a little bit sort of flat and doesn't really express all that we see in reality. So that's what I mean by a conversation, right? People are responding in the books to the other books. And we've organized in a certain way, basically to sort of put them kind of in historical perspective, but also we kind of organized them sort of thematically. And because of that, we can't read it sort of with Genesis at the beginning, and we're going to have one conversation that's continued all the way through Revelation. We have to see it as more of a history of people having responses and having viewpoints about it. Now, the second part I want to say about that was that these conversations are because of the way we as humans are going to approach a lot of these big questions, right? So we talk about questions of where do we come from, where are we going, origins and future, why are we here, why is the world the way it is, and when we look at things like who is God, who are we in relationship to God, what does God want from us, there are a couple different perspectives there as well, right? So not only do we have like this historical arc in this, which we've organized a little bit, thematic organization as well, but we're also going to have these ongoing conversations between a couple of different groups. I would argue there's probably about three big opinions about how we are supposed to approach God or how God wants to relate to us. We'll get to this probably later in the book, so I don't want to talk about that just right now. But what he's addressing is that when we approach the Bible as a single book, like, I don't Pride and Prejudice or Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone or whatever book that might be comparable in length, but it's told as one single story. And then we come to the Bible, and it's actually a couple of different stories, a couple of different opinions, a couple of perspectives. And then we're going to get lost because this person say X and this person say not X, and how do those go together, and how does that work? So that we'll explore as we continue on with Dan Kimball. And that's also going to be something we're going to explore ourselves in the future as the study goes on. So, point two is the Bible is written for us and not to us. And he makes a very good argument. I'm not going to rehash his arguments in that, which is the Bible was written for a different culture than we are. And so when we approach it with our perspective as 21st century, I'm American to American, Caucasian people, we're going to have to understand that it's not written for our century. It's not written for our culture or nation. It's not written in our language of English. And there's a certain level of translation. Now, we miss that because we forget that the Bible is, as we receive it, translated out of the languages of Hebrew and the related language of Aramaic that we see mostly in the Hebrew Bible, and in the language of Greek that we see in the New Testament. It's in order to bring it into English, right? We have this would be equivalent of like having half of the conversation in Spanish and half of the conversation in German, but the magic of translation machine has made it all sound like in English, like we're on some sort of science fiction program. And we forget that one, when you translate between two languages, you have to make choices about what words you're going to use. That was what we talked about a little bit in chapter one with the word unicorn. If you weren't there for the previous video, go back to the video for chapter one and read chapter one. And understand that we have to pick a word. And sometimes the word we pick is not as precise, or as what we might call the semantic field is not precisely overlapping in the two languages, and so something is lost in translation. But then we also have to translate it across our culture. So not only do we have to put it into English, but we also have to kind of think about how the Bible relates to our situation, right? So, the famous example, I think I've said this in a previous video, I think it was the Prelude video, I talked about this, right? You know, for 2,000 years, the book of Revelation was added into the library. People have been discussing and debating what it means. Is it written for their time, or do they live in the end time? And so this book is the prediction of what's going to go down. So I need to figure out what the red dragon is, and who is this person, and who is that person, and how does it relate. This has been going on for 2,000 years. People, every generation, is like, we're the last generation. It's talking to us. It's a Apache helicopter. So this, that. This is this person, and this is this person. We've not been right so far, because that translation is also imprecise. And so we don't know how to always bring concepts or ideas over. We have the word translation issue. We also have the idea translation issue. This is one of the reasons why we have a lot of different translations of the Bible into English, right? There's a variety, King James and New American Standard, Christian Standard, and English Standard. Everybody likes to call themselves the Standard, and the this New Revised and this other, all message. Uh, and the point is that everyone goes, I think I could do it a little bit better. I think I know how to bring it over. And in this case, we should actually kind of like bring all of this together. We should be reading a couple of different versions, particularly if we get confused by something. So if we're reading something about like, I don't know what this means, go look up the same passage in the different translations and look at the different kind of options of how we brought the words, the concepts over into English. And so we have to remember that there is a translation issue on multiple levels that we have to deal with. And we can't go, well, I just don't like that because that's imprecise and blah, 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 blah. Like that kind of judgmental attitude is what I think Dan Campbell is going to get into, is that we have to remember that there's a certain amount of uh, grace we have to have for uh, how the Bible is translated and how we're receiving the Bible and how we and other people are going to apply the Bible, right? Can't be so strict, because that kind of black and white thinking doesn't really pay well to what we see in the Bible itself. And uh, with that, uh, the problem with YouTube Live is that we can't have a conversation live. So I'm now going to turn to the chat. And Brittany, do you have any questions from the chat? I'll read it, and then I'll discuss it for you. So this is kind of one-sided conversation. I'm not sure I really like this, but we're going to try that. Yeah, the Bible is scary. You're right, comment. It scared me the first time I read it. There's a lot of scary stuff in there, and it's kind of weird, right? And that part of weirdness, I think, for me, it compels me to want to read it more. It compels me to want to go, what's about that? What am I supposed to do with that? And how am I supposed to respond to that, live that out, or whatever? So, yeah. Uh, so, do you have any questions, Brittany? Do you have a response that you want to make? I'll just read it out for you. we'll talk about what our next chapter is gonna be. So, for next week, for those of you who are participating in our live discussion of this, we're going to be reading chapter 3. Chapter 3 is titled Never Read a Bible Verse, which I love the title that he's picking for these chapters. And so that's going to be pages 39 through, he flips on screen, through 56. And then he does have some summary points where he's going to pull together the prelude and chapters 1, 2, and 3. So that's on page 57. And so we'll pick it up those three with chapter 3. And then I'll probably also do a little bit of a review of the summary points for this part 1. All right? So with that, then I'll see you all next week. Thanks for coming.